The tension in Los Angeles had been building for weeks, fueled by secrets, misguided loyalties, and the convoluted emotions that seemed to thrive only in the worlds of high fashion and high drama. Electra Forrester had spent months trying to put her life back together after the havoc that Luna's return and pregnancy had caused. She and Will Spencer had battled through misunderstandings, betrayals orchestrated by others, and their own moments of vulnerability. They had recommitted, made promises in the silent corners of the Forrester estate, and begun to imagine a future in which their love would not be continuously tested by external forces. Will had even hinted at something more permanent, which made Electra's heart flutter with cautious optimism. But Dylan had appeared unexpectedly, like a storm cloud. She arrived with a tragic story, down on her luck, living out of her car, and Will, the ever-compassionate Spencer, offered her a room in the guest house. At first, it appeared innocent enough. Dylan was polite, thankful, and kept to herself. Electra tried to be compassionate. She knew how it felt to be lost and alone. However, something about Dylan's presence bothered her. Dylan's overly long stare at Will, the lingering casual touches, and the combined giggles that rang throughout the home when Electra wasn't present. Electra questioned Will about it several times, her voice shaking with the dread she attempted to conceal. He soothed her every time, stating Dylan was simply a buddy in need and that nothing had happened other than a brief lapse, a kiss born of bewilderment and consolation at one of their lowest periods. Electra wanted to believe him. She adored Will intensely, the type of love that had weathered harsher storms than these. But doubt crept in like ivy on a wall, slowly and relentlessly. She plunged herself into work at Forrester Creations, sketching concepts late into the night, hoping that the creative outlet would drown out the questions swirling about in her head. Meanwhile, the quadrangle tightened. R.J. Forrester hovered alongside, lending a sympathetic ear and a shoulder that seemed frighteningly familiar. He and Electra had shared a moment in the intensity of pain, a kiss that neither had planned but both regretted immediately. It complicated things, transforming what should have been a simple reconciliation into a labyrinth of guilt and accusations. Will also struggled. He cared about Dylan. She had become a regular in his life, someone who listened without passing judgment when the pressure from his family and the continual turmoil at Forrester became too much. But his heart belonged to Electra. He intended to dissolve the living arrangement and send Dylan on her way with enough resources to start again. He even began to envision the future in concrete terms: a ring, a proposal, a life based on the foundation they had worked so hard to restore. He imagined the scene, the beach at sunset, and the words he'd say to put things right once and for all. The day came sooner than everybody imagined. Will had arranged everything quietly. A small event at the beach house with intimate friends and family, nothing showy. Dylan, ignorant of the full plan, helped set up, her smile beaming as she put flowers and lit candles. She had grown fond of the Spencers and the stability Will provided. Perhaps there was a glimmer of optimism in her mind, that the kindness he offered her could lead to anything more. Will took her aside momentarily, his look solemn but compassionate, and explained that it was time for her to move on, for everyone's benefit. Electra had been alerted by a combination of intuition and whispers from those who still cared about her happiness. She drove to the beach house, her pulse racing in her ears, unsure what she'd discover but determined not to let this go without a fight. Will was on one knee, holding a tiny box, and Dylan stood in front of him, wide-eyed. The words had yet to be spoken, but the intention hung in the air like salt spray. Electra's breath caught. This was it, the moment she had feared, when all she had built fell apart. She rushed forward before reason could stop her. Stop! Her cry echoed across the calm shore, piercing and frantic. Heads turned. Will rose immediately, surprise on his face. Dylan took a step back, a confused expression on her face. Electra's hands trembled as she held the strap on her purse, her gaze fixed on Will. You can't do this. Not like this. Not without knowing the truth. Will pinched his brow. Electra, what are you? I'm pregnant. The words came out fresh and unfiltered. She hadn't intended to say it in this way, and she hadn't truly accepted it until the test verified what her body had been whispering for days. She blamed her morning sickness on stress and her weariness on working late nights. But reality had hit her like a wave earlier that morning when she stood alone in her bathroom staring at the two pink lines. She had come here to fight for him, to remind him of what they shared, but the confession now held a weight she had not expected. Silence fell across the crowd. The ocean rolled in the backdrop, unconcerned about the human pandemonium developing on the coast. Will's face had lost its color. "Pregnant?" he asked, barely audible above the ocean. Electra nodded, tears forming but not falling. "It's yours, Will. I found out today. I was going to tell you. I wanted us to be together, when I did. But I can't let you throw everything away without knowing." Dylan glanced between them, the proposal forgotten. Her own ambitions were dashed in an instant. She had never tried to come between them, but the lines had become so blurred in the guest house's common space. When confronted with this irrefutable truth, she felt the ground shake beneath her. I didn't know," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Will looked from Electra to Dylan and back again, the ring still in his hand. The proposal was intended to confirm his decision, to demonstrate to Electra that she was the one he desired. But suddenly it felt like fate's cruel joke. He approached Electra, reaching for her, but she raised her hand. "Don't," she replied quietly. "Not yet. I didn't come here to trap you. I came because I love you, and because this changes everything. But I won't beg. If you still want to marry her, if that's what your heart is telling you, then do it. But know what you're walking away from." The sentence hung heavily. Will's thoughts raced. He recalled the nights he and Electra had spent talking about the future and how she made him laugh even when the world seemed too serious. He thought about Dylan, of their friendship, which had evolved into something complex but never quite love. And now this, his child, binds him to Electra in ways that nothing else can. Dylan backed backward slowly. "I should go," she muttered. "This isn't my place anymore." She turned to walk towards the house, her shoulders bent against the unexpected coolness in the air. Electra watched her leave, feeling both sympathy and relief. She didn't want to hurt anyone, but the truth had to be revealed. Will closed the space between them, slapping the ring box shut in his pocket. "Electra," he murmured, his voice full of intensity. "I was going to propose to you. Not her. I was ending things with Dylan today. The proposal, it was for us. I got it wrong in the moment." She looked into his eyes, looking for the lie, but only saw sorrow and love. "Then why did it look like? Because I was stupid," he admitted. "I let things drag on too long. I should have sent her away weeks ago, but I didn't want to be cruel. And now." He tentatively touched her arm. "A baby. Our baby." Electra exhaled shakily. "I don't know what this means for us. I'm scared, Will. I'm afraid we'll mess this up like we almost did before." He drew her close and she didn't protest. "We won't. Not if we face it together. I love you, Electra. I want this, us, the baby, all of it." They stood there as the sun dropped lower, sending long shadows across the beach. The interrupted proposition remained like an incomplete sentence, but the confession altered the conclusion. Friends and family muttered their amazement and support as the drama unfolded in true Forrester Spencer flair. Electra put her head on Will's chest, feeling his heartbeat. For the first time in months, the future seemed possible, not flawless, not pain-free, but shared. In the days that followed, the news spread like wildfire among the families. Steffi responded with a mix of concern and enthusiasm, already plotting ways to include a new Forrester Spencer heir into the company's heritage. RJ offered muted congratulations, but the recollection of their own kiss added an unpleasant layer that would take time to smooth over. Ivy, ever the meddler, observed from the sidelines, her plans temporarily thwarted by this unexpected development. Electra, Will took it slowly. Doctor appointments, quiet conversations about names and nurseries, rebuilding trust one honest conversation at a time. Dylan moved on, forging her own path with a glowing recommendation from Forrester Creations and a commitment to stay out of the tangled web. The beach house proposal became a story they could laugh about later, a near miss that eventually brought them together. The pregnancy presented difficulties: morning sickness that drained Electra, hormonal swings that taxed their patience, but it also provided delight. Will attended each scan, placing his palm on her expanding belly and whispering vows to the small creature inside. Electra sketched baby outfits in her leisure time, using soft fabrics and gentle patterns that mirrored her hope. As the weeks and months passed, the drama that had defined their lives became more stable. They weren't married yet, but their commitment seemed stronger than any ring could represent. Electra had canceled the wedding that never happened, not out of malice, but out of love and truth. And by doing so, she had given them a chance at the family they both secretly desired. In the bright, turbulent world of the bold and the beautiful, where secrets were rarely kept and love was always put to the test, this moment stood out as a quiet win. Electra Forrester, once broken by betrayal and mistrust, now carries new life and hope. Will Spencer, the attractive heir who had almost lost everything, embraced her and promised never to let go again. The road ahead would be full of twists and turns, family interference, corporate rivalries, and the unavoidable issues about timing and readiness, but for the time being, they faced it together, joined by a revelation that altered everything. The place had been meticulously prepped for the event. Soft white flowers framed the aisle, their scent wafting gently across the air. Guests crowded the chairs, whispering excitedly as they awaited the moment Dylan and Will had promised them for months. It was meant to be the best day of their lives. The music started slowly, indicating that the ceremony was about to begin. Will stood in the front, nervously tweaking the cuff of his sleeve. His best man said something encouraging, but Will could barely hear it. His gaze remained fixated on the entrance, waiting for Dylan to emerge. Dylan appeared just a few moments later. She looked radiant as she walked down the aisle, her dress flowing behind her. Her smile wavered slightly from emotion, but it was genuine. This was the future she had envisioned, one in which all of the uncertainty of the past faded and she and Will embarked on something new together. Their gazes locked, and the world appeared to hush around them. Will felt a sense of relief rush over him. After everything they had been through, they had finally arrived at this point. The officiant cleared his throat and started speaking. His voice carried softly across the small room, introducing everyone and discussing love, dedication, and Dylan and Will's journey to this point. Guests listened intently. Several people wiped away tears. But in the rear of the room, someone stood motionless near the doorway. Electra. Her hands trembled by her sides. She had been standing there for several minutes, watching the ceremony start without her. She hadn't counted on waiting this long. She had intended to halt it before Dylan even walked down the aisle. But when Dylan appeared, smiling and hopeful, Electra paused. Now it was almost too late. The officiant had just inquired whether anyone objected to the union. The typical question remained in the air, and most people expected it to be met with silence. For a moment it appeared that it would. Then Electra came forward. "I object." The words rang clear throughout the room. Gasps rang out from every corner. Dylan turned slowly, her expression filled with confusion. Will stiffened alongside her, his heart thumping. Electra walked down the aisle. Each step felt heavier than the last. Every set of eyes followed her. Will appeared astonished. "Electra, what are you doing here?" Her voice shook as she replied. "I apologize. I realize this isn't the appropriate approach, but I cannot let this happen." Dylan's brow wrinkled. "You can't let this happen? What exactly are you talking about?" Electra paused a few steps away from them. Her chest lifted and sank as she attempted to keep herself steady. "I didn't come here to cause a scene," she remarked calmly, but I couldn't stay silent any longer. The tension in the room became overwhelming. Will moved closer to her. "Electra, whatever it is, we can discuss it later. This is not the moment." She shook her head forcefully. "No." It had to be now. Dylan felt a chilly knot form in her stomach. Something about Electra's tone made her uncomfortable. Say what you came to say, Dylan instructed gently. Electra looked at Will. Then she spoke the words that shattered the room. I'm pregnant. The hush that followed was complete. Will glanced at her, his face losing color. Dylan blinked with surprise. What? Electra swallowed hard. I am pregnant, Will. And the baby is yours. The guests began whispering immediately. Shock swept across the crowd like electricity. Will took a step back, as if the ground below him had shifted. That's not possible, he remarked. Electra's eyes streamed with tears. You know it is. Dylan took a hesitant step toward Will. Her expression had changed totally. The warmth and joy that had previously existed had fled, leaving only hurt and bewilderment. Will, she murmured quietly, tell me she's lying. Will opened his mouth but didn't say anything. The hesitancy in itself felt like confirmation. Dylan's heart beat painfully. Tell me. Electra said again, her voice breaking. It happened before you got back together. He and I were together. Just once when everything had fallen apart. Neither of us expected this. Will massaged his face, overcome. I didn't know, he replied. Electra, you assured me you were all right. You never said anything. She responded, I only found out yesterday. I did not want to believe it either. I felt I could handle it on my own. But when I heard about the wedding, she stared at Dylan. I could not remain silent. Dylan felt as if the air had been drained from the room. All of the memories of arranging this day raced through her mind, late-night chats, laughing, and the promise that their previous mistakes were behind them. Everything felt flimsy now. Did you know? Dylan asked Will gently.
No, he said.
I swear to Dylan. I did not. Electra nodded. He is telling the truth. I didn't inform him. However, this did not change the reality of the situation. Dylan stared down at her hands, which were grasping the fabric of her dress. This can't be happening, she whispered. The officiant shuffled nervously, obviously unsure what to do. Guests were astonished and fascinated. Will approached Dylan. Please listen to me. She stopped him with her hand. I need a minute. Electra's tears finally flowed. I never wanted to hurt you, Dylan. Dylan laughed quietly, but there was no comedy in it. That's exactly what you've done. The room was terribly tight. Will raked his hands through his hair, panic growing within him. Everything he'd worked for was disintegrating in front of everyone he cared about. Electra, he asked, why now? Why did you come here today? Because once you say your vows, everything will change, she explained. I didn't want our child to grow up knowing I remained silent while you began a new life based on a lie. Dylan glanced at her fiercely. A lie? Electra caught her gaze.
Yes.
Because this also affects him. Dylan felt tears well up in her eyes, but she forced herself to remain calm. She refused to break down in front of a large crowd. So, what did you expect to happen? Dylan inquired. Electra paused. I do not know. I just believed you deserved to know the facts before making a decision. Will turn back to Dylan. I love you. That has not altered. Her voice quivered. But your life just did. The impact of that words weighed heavy on them. Guests kept whispering, some sympathetic, others simply intrigued by the unfolding spectacle. Will looked across the room, understanding how public the situation had become. Maybe we should step outside and talk, he said. Dylan nodded slowly.
Yes.
We should. She addressed the guests with false courtesy. Please excuse us for a moment. She strolled past Electra, without saying anything else. Will followed her fast. Electra stayed standing near the altar, feeling the scrutiny of dozens of eyes. The cooler air outside did little to settle Dylan's mind. Will approached warily. Dylan. She turned to face him, her eyes shining. Did you love her? She asked. It wasn't like that, he said. It was a mistake. But now there's a baby. He nodded slowly. Yes. Dylan wrapped her arms around herself. I wanted today to be simple, she whispered. Just the two of us promising to move forward. We still can, Will insisted frantically. This does not have to destroy us, she said, looking at him regretfully. You are about to become a father to someone else, Will. That isn't a minor complication. He had no response. Inside the venue, Electra sat alone in the front row, waiting. She was aware that everyone was blaming her. Maybe they were correct. But she also knew she couldn't live with herself if she let the wedding go on without telling the truth. Dylan and will return minutes later. The room became silent again. Dylan walked slowly down the aisle, no longer beaming with enthusiasm, but rather with quiet strength. She paused by Electra and stared down at her. "Are you sure?" Dylan inquired quietly. Electra nodded. Dylan took a deep breath. "I wouldn't lie about something like this." Then she turned to face the guests. "I think it's clear that today isn't the day for this wedding." There was a wave of murmuring across the crowd. Will appeared upset, but did not protest. Dylan placed the bouquet on a neighboring chair. "I need time to figure out what all of this means," she told me. "For all of us." Electra lowered her gaze, shame emblazoned across her face. The dream of a beautiful ceremony had evaporated, leaving behind uncertainty and conflicting feelings that none of them were prepared for. And as the visitors slowly left the premises, one thing became brutally evident to everyone present. Nothing about Dylan, Will, or Electra's life would ever be the same again.